The taping of the daytime panel show had been intended as a discussion on cultural responsibility and the role of celebrities in influencing public opinion. Denzel Washington appeared as a guest, invited to share his thoughts on faith, community, and media ethics. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the outspoken co-host, didn't hold back. From the outset, there was tension in the air. The audience sensed it. The host sensed it, and Denzel sat calmly, listening with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence that said, more than any outburst could. Whoopi began by challenging the notion that celebrities should express strong moral stances, saying we're entertainers, not preachers. It's not our job to teach the public anything. Her tone was dismissive, almost sarcastic. Right. Denzel nodded slightly before replying, maybe not all entertainers. But some of us were raised to believe silence is the enemy of truth. Room grew quieter. Whoopi laughed, brushing off the comment. Truth? Whose truth, Denzel? Everyone has their own these days, she chuckled, looking for validation from her fellow co-hosts. Denzel leaned forward slightly, his voice still measured. There's only one truth, Whoopi. The difference is whether you're brave enough to say it out loud when the room wants to laugh instead. The crowd murmured. Whoopi stiffened. You think I'm not brave? She asked, a smile masking her irritation. I think you confuse applause with approval, Denzel said, and that's where credibility starts to slip. The audience gasped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it landed like a hammer wrapped in silk. Temperature shifted. Whoopi, not used to being checked so directly on her own stage, fired back. You don't know what I've faced? You think you're the only black person who's spoken truth to power? Denzel didn't flinch. I know you've faced plenty. But somewhere along the way, you started defending power more than challenging. That sentence hit harder than any shout. Even the production crew momentarily stopped moving. The studio, which moments earlier was filled with laughter, had become a courtroom, and Denzel was delivering testimony with every word. Another co-host tried to pivot. Let's not get personal, guys. We're here to talk about media narratives. Denzel smiled politely, but held the floor. Media narratives are shaped by the credibility of the voices behind them. If those voices start serving applause instead of truth, what you get is performance, not principle. Whoopi, momentarily speechless, looked around for backup. None came. Her silence was loud. And in that silence, Denzel's credibility eclipsed. Hers entirely. Clips of the exchange hit the internet within minutes. One moment, one sentence was isolated, shared, dissected across every platform. I think you confuse applause with approval. The phrase became instantly viral. Think, pieces flooded timelines. Memes were created. Commentary poured in. What made it sting wasn't just the wording. It was the surgical precision of the timing. Denzel hadn't lost his cool. It simply stripped away pretense with clarity. Commentators on both sides of the political aisle chimed in. Some defended Whoopi's role in challenging the status quo. Others celebrated Denzel for refusing to let familiarity become an excuse for complacency. But one theme emerged over and over, a respect for Washington's ability to confront without condescension. He didn't cancel her, one columnist wrote. He corrected her. And he did it without raising his voice once. Whoopi later addressed the moment on social media, posting vaguely. Sometimes we agree to disagree. No hard feelings. But the public wasn't satisfied with the deflection. The comment sections flooded with references to Denzel's line, the users asking why credibility was now being reduced to performance and applause. For many, the clip symbolized a larger issue, how public figures often mistake popularity for righteousness. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed out of the digital storm. In an interview later that week, he was asked about the viral moment. He simply said, "Truth doesn't need a campaign. It stands on its own. And when it shows up, it doesn't care whose feelings get hurt." That quote, too, made waves not as a jab, but as a reaffirmation of the position he took that day. He wasn't there to win a debate. He was there to remind the public and, maybe even Whoopi, what leadership sounds like when it's rooted in conviction, not applause. The media frenzy surrounding the moment began to take on a life of its own. News anchors debated its implications. and radio hosts used it as a launching point to discuss how celebrity culture often enables false authority. But amid all the noise, one truth remained clear. Denzel's voice carried weight not because it was famous, but because it was fearless. He didn't weaponize shame, he revealed it. Backstage sources later revealed Whoopi remained quiet for the rest of the taping. Her usual charisma noticeably dimmed, not because she was defeated, but because she'd been confronted by someone whose moral compass couldn't be spun by studio lights. It was the kind of exchange that lives on, not just as entertainment, but as a watermark moment where ego met principle, and principle didn't flinch. Denzel's single quotes as silence in the days following was interpreted not as retreat, but as discipline. He wasn't milking the moment. He had already moved on. Secure in the knowledge that real change isn't measured by views or likes, but by how deeply the truth unsettles comfort zones. And in that studio, he had shattered one of the biggest in classrooms. Professors began referencing the clip during discussions on rhetoric and ethics. What Washington did here, one media professor said, was deconstruct the illusion of authority built on applause. He reminded us that charisma can't cover up contradiction forever. Students wrote essays on it. His podcast hosts broke it down line by line. Whoopi's defenders argued she was just playing devil's advocate. But Denzel's fans countered with receipts, her past comments, her shifting stances, her tendency to dismiss critique with comedy. The joke's only funny until someone holds up a mirror, one tweet read. And Denzel had held up that mirror in the most unforgiving way, publicly and without apology. Public perception shifted. People started scrutinizing not just Whoopi's comments, but the broader issue of accountability among high-profile commentators. Denzel's sentence, one line, had done more to spark critical thought than most op-eds could dream of. That's what made it powerful. It didn't tell people what to think. It forced them to ask why they hadn't thought of it sooner. The next time Whoopi hosted the show, she avoided topics related to media trust and credibility. It was a subtle pivot, but viewers noticed. She's not the same since Denzel, one viewer tweeted. Another wrote, she didn't just lose an argument, she lost the illusion that nobody could challenge her. In many ways, Denzel hadn't ended Whoopi's career, he'd ended her immunity. Meanwhile, community leaders praised Denzel's conduct. We need more voices like his, one activist said. People who don't get loud but get real. That sentiment echoed across faith communities, youth mentorship groups, and educational circles. For many, Denzel didn't just defend truth, he modeled what responsible influence looks like when the cameras are rolling. When asked again later if he thought Whoopi's credibility was gone, Denzel answered with characteristic restraint, credibility doesn't disappear, it gets tested. Whether it holds or not depends on whether you can handle the test. It was a graceful close to a conversation others would have prolonged. But that's the Denzel way. Leave the echo, not the echo chamber. Legacy. Media outlets debated the exchange for weeks, but the impact had already landed. The message was clear. Truth doesn't need a platform, it becomes one. And Denzel had become a living example of how a single sentence, spoken at the right moment, can expose more than 1,000 arguments ever could. So yes, Denzel Washington ended Whoopi Goldberg's credibility in one sentence, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with unapologetic clarity. He reminded the world that applause isn't the same as approval, and in doing so, he drew a line in the sand between performance and principle, between clout and conviction, and left no doubt about which side he stood on.